bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons here with the HockeyWriters.com. As always, Colton Pankiw is with me as well. Colton, how you doing, man?
Good. It looks like NHL trade deadline day today. There's all sorts of moves, and not only the West, but the Oilers finally getting in on the mix, which we're going to get into. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, we were wondering when that shoe was going to drop. Everybody figured Ken Holland might wait until Thursday or Friday, but Tuesday as we record this, and I'm consistently hitting the refresh button on Twitter here because I don't know that they're done necessarily, but Ken Holland makes a major splash. So we're going to be talking about that on the show today, what the Oilers added, what the Oilers sent away, and there's two pieces. Well, there's a bunch of pieces, but two major ones that are kind of heading off the Oilers roster. The one that is coming in, Mattias Ekholm is planning on playing tomorrow night as we record this. When people see this, it'll be tonight against the Toronto Maple Leafs if he's able to get in on time and do that. So we're going to talk about all of that stuff. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start on the first trade that happened today, or do you want to talk about the rumors even heading in before these first trades started happening? Where do you want to go here?
I mean, either or. I guess the rumors maybe that came in before is kind of, I think, what people would like to hear.
Okay, so what we were catching wind of, and there was a few reports about this. Darren Dreger was really all over this on TSN. He had said that Ken Holland had circled back to both Montreal, to Nashville, and to Arizona about Jakob Chychrun. There was even some talk that maybe he was kind of talking again about Vladislav Gavrikov out of Columbus. So he was clearly in the mode to try to do something. He did a media avail where he sort of said, look, I'm looking to do something. He gave a lot more information today in these Jesse Pujujarvi media scrum afterwards with that trade, but we knew that he was probably making some kind of a play here, whether or not he was going to be able to pull it off, whether the prices would come down, or whether he was willing to pay the price that it was going to cost to get whoever it was that he had targeted. It sounded like maybe Chychrun was the top one. Ekholm was number two. And then Edmonton wasn't really on the radar anymore in Montreal, but Gavrikov could have been out there. And it was hard to know what these teams were doing. What do you think happened? First, let's start with the Chychrun thing, because it sounds like that one sort of fell apart. Like he was very into those talks today with Arizona, circled back. They got really deep in conversations, but then it just sort of came to a halt and things petered out and he went the direction of Nashville. What do you think happened there with the Jakob Chychrun talk? Do you think it was just Coyotes' price is too high?
Yeah, I think so. I think like they were able to get Ekholm, I think, for a pretty reasonable price. Obviously, we'll get into that a bit more later, but I do think, yeah, the price on Chychrun sounds like, I mean, it's not just the Oilers balking at it, right? Like we've talked about it. He's been on the market for a long time and no one really wants to seem to pony up. So I have a feeling the offer they would have kind of given to the Coyotes was very similar to what they sent to the Predators. And I mean, to be honest, the position the Coyotes are in, they really don't have a lot of use for Barrie, even with the extra year on his deal, other than just to try and flip him again. So I can kind of see from their perspective, if that was the same deal, why they maybe were a bit hesitant. But I think just with that price, it made more sense, even though I was big on Chychrun and Ekholm. When you'd see the names left, was kind of number two on my list, as I think it was with Holland. But I think just for the price they paid, it made the most sense.
Yeah, it's interesting because now that the trade has actually sort of happened and it is Mattias Ekholm that they go and get. And so the Oilers give up first this year. They give up a conditional, 2024 pick. They give up Reed Schaefer, the prospect, and they give up Tyson Barrie in the deal. You kind of look at Mattias Ekholm, because I know a lot of people did today, because they say they know the player pretty well, but you don't get the chance to watch Nashville a whole bunch. So I'm sure there was a bunch of Oilers fans scrounging around going, what exactly is Mattias Ekholm? He's been around forever, 12 years, I think. But do you really know his game all that well? So and you start to look at this and go, man, this is a good player. Like he can play both the left and the right side. He's a veteran, tons of playoff experience. He's an older guy, good leader on the Nashville Predators. He's a really, really solid player, defense first, but adds a little offense there. Can play both sides. Like there's a lot to really like about him. So you kind of go, okay, this is a really good fit, maybe even more than Jakob Chychrun, because Jakob Chychrun was that player who's going to give you a ton of points. He's going to help you with your power play. He's going to do a lot of really good things for you offensively, but there's still those question marks about him defensively. There are no question marks about Mattias Ekholm when it comes to defense. The Edmonton Oilers are like legitimately better today defensively than they were before adding Mattias Ekholm. So having said all that, and you were high on Jakob Chychrun, do you think it's probably best that the Oilers were able to kind of shift gears and go, okay, well, the Chychrun thing doesn't sound like it's going to work out. And by the way, I don't think it's happening. I don't know that it's dead. I don't know that the conversations about Chychrun are off. I think the Oilers might still actually look for a right-handed defenseman. But do you like the idea of Mattias Ekholm?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, like I said, you'd kind of heard whispers weeks and even months ago when it was first made known that Nashville was kind of putting feelers out for him, that the Oilers could be interested, but there wasn't really any real link between the two until pretty recently. And then, like I said, with other names kind of getting taken off the board on the back end days prior, like he quickly moved to number 2 on my list right behind Chychrun, as it was pretty clear at that point, obviously, that Erik Karlsson wasn't really an option. So I am happy with it. And like when I had first seen that they had landed him, I was thrilled. And then obviously you kind of see that what the return is. And I still think it's a really good trade. It's upsetting. I think I had come, even though with his defensive shortcomings, I'd come to really be a fan of Tyson Barrie's game. And just the fact that he had selected the Oilers to come here on a 1-year deal and then re-signed when we've seen a lot of other players choose to leave for whatever it may be, a better climate kind of thing. So to see him recommit and then see him kind of get shipped off there when they're right in the playoff hunt is, I feel for him, but at the same time, I do think it was a good move.
Yeah, no, it is one of those things where the cap world just sort of necessitates things. Like they traded Jesse Pujujarvi. We'll talk about that one in a second, but that wasn't going to be enough to get the Mattias Ekholm deal done. And Nashville retains 4% of Ekholm's salary, which works out to $250K. You know what? I get the idea, I suppose, of getting the player down to $6 million. I'm not really sure why they did it. I am a little shocked that Nashville chose to use one of their retention slots on this.
Yeah.
Like, what's $250K? Why would you even, like, if you're going to retain more than that so that you don't lose a slot for that? I'm not sure. There must be some reason that happened, and maybe that I haven't come across yet, but I'm a little surprised that they did that.
I've never seen that. I'd never seen, I don't think, anything less than like 25% on a deal before. So I kind of laughed when I saw that. That was a first for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, $250K on a $6 million salary, it's enough to, maybe make a difference if you're moving a piece here or there or whatever, but it's not going to the ability to retain salary, especially if you're the Nashville Predators and you need to sell some pieces off. Like, let's say, for example, that they do really want to sell here over the next couple of days, that they're surprised at the return for Ekholm and they go, okay, well, let's see if we can move Johansson. Let's see if we can move Duchesne. They're going to have to retain salary on those 2 deals. And now that you've lost a slot with Mattias Ekholm for $250K, what happens if you could have moved one of those players, but because you're retaining on too many things, you can't now? Like that. Yeah. That seems a little crazy to me. I don't quite understand that one. And like I said, I don't know the details of why they did it. And maybe there's something there I'm missing, but it was interesting. And that the Oilers didn't push for them to maybe retain a little more is kind of a shocker too. And you'd think they'd be willing to do it, but it's a 1st-round pick for Ekholm. Do you think it's worth it? Like, they talked about Ken Holland giving up a first. He said he was willing and open to do it after he talked about the Puljujarvi trade. Is Ekholm a guy that is worth that price? I think Barrie, having said that, Barrie going was necessary for the cap. It's the 1st-round pick. That's the real value here, because at some point Barrie was probably going anyway. But the value here is the 1st-round pick. Do you think he's worth it?
Yeah, no, I do. And I think it's important to keep in mind that as loaded as this upcoming draft's supposed to be, that pick wasn't going to be a high one. Obviously, I think the Oilers, if anything, will place higher in the standings by the end of the season than they are right now. So it's not going to be a very good or a very high or a very high pick. But I do think, again, like going back to the Barrie thing, I think it's a good trade, but I am curious to kind of see what that does. Like, I think Barrie plays a bigger role in that power play than maybe people realize. All the credit obviously goes to the McDavid's, Draisaitl's, but he found chemistry back there right from that first season. I know last year was a bit of a letdown production wise, but he was again right back to being like an elite offensive defenseman on that unit again. And the other thing too is just how well, like, you always heard these things about just how loved he is in that dressing room. Like, if not the most popular guy in there, one of them. So I am kind of curious. Obviously, I think the players understand that they're doing this to get better, but that's a big part of their team in more ways than I think a lot of people realize. So it is a fairly big loss, but again, yeah, I think it is worth it to go out and get an elite shutdown or a top 2, top 4, top shutdown defenseman like they did.
Yeah, you know what? I thought the exact same thing when they made that trade. And so I looked around, and Wood Guy, if you know him on Twitter, he does a lot of really good analytic type underlying numbers sort of research. And he actually posted a tweet about Tyson Barrie's productivity on the power play with guys like McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent Hopkins, and he compared them. And he actually showed in a chart here, I'm just looking at it, that there's not much of a difference outside of last year without Barrie, where there was somewhat of a significant drop. There's like no difference between him being on the power play and not being on the power play with those three people. So like the numbers this year, for example, like goals for per 60, 16 with Barrie on, 15.9 with Barrie off. So like it's really close. So that was one of the questions I was going to ask you is, yes, Barrie is super productive on the power play. He's got tons of points and he's really good at it. He fits like a glove. But do you think that even if they're getting those numbers without him, that someone like Evan Bouchard can slot in there and take over that role and be as effective? I think the only thing we're talking about here is the way Evan Bouchard playing this season actually going to hurt the power play? Like, I don't think he's going to I think he can fit in there. And I think offensively, he could probably do what Tyson Barrie's doing, especially if they're scoring at the rate they are without Tyson Barrie. But like Evan Bouchard has struggled this season, right? He's really had a hard time getting a shot through. He doesn't seem very decisive on what he wants to do. You need that on the power play. Do you think Evan Bouchard can fill in here? Like, because that's going to be what they're going to ask him to do. They need him to step up and play that role now.
Yeah, so that's the big risk in this, right? Is everyone kind of knew that Barrie was almost kind of like a placeholder until Bouchard. They deemed he was ready for that role, and we've seen sometimes last season he kind of jumped up there and done it. And I mean, you'd hope so. Ideally, he'd be doing this at the beginning of the season where he could really kind of adjust to it, get used to it, rather than right down in the thick of things when they're in the playoff push. But I mean, this is kind of his, time to prove it. Like, this is kind of supposed to be what his bread and butter is, right? He was drafted as an elite, supposed to be an elite offensive defenseman, and he's shown spurts. Obviously, rookie season had north of 40 points. So I think he's capable of it. But like you said, that he's struggled so far. So it's tough to get a read on it. What I'm hoping happens is that he does get placed on it right away and is able to perform well. And that kind of picks up his confidence and helps improve other parts of his games, kind of the lapses defensively, like you said, almost kind of seeming unsure of himself, slow reads, things like that. So I'm hoping that kind of getting into this groove on the power play will improve his game overall.
Well, and not only that, because I 100% agree with you. I think that having a little bit of offensive production and success on a power play where he can get that shot off and he can really contribute in that way will just get him more confident doing other things. But I think the real key here for me is depending on where Ekholm plays, he could be a better version of Duncan Keith for Evan Bouchard. And Duncan Keith was really good for Evan Bouchard last year. Like, you saw how much Evan Bouchard's game elevated when Duncan Keith became his line mate and his pair on that blue line. Bouchard was like night and day better. Like, it was just so different. And Ekholm has got that ability probably to come in there, settle him down, to work together as a pair, if that's what they end up doing. I don't know if that's what they'll do, because there are two options here, right? You could put Ekholm on the left side and limit Darnell Nurse's minutes a little bit, or you could put him on the right side. And Ekholm said in his media thing today, he's like, I can play either one. I don't care. Like, I'm totally comfortable in either spot, which then maybe moves Ceci down to the second pair, and you put Ekholm with Nurse together, or you put Ekholm with Bouchard on the left side. Like, there's so many different ways that you can run this, that I think that's going to be really good for Bouchard, because he's going to have a partner who can settle him down a little bit, right? And maybe make him more confident. So I think that could be really good for him. Let's hope that's what turns out to be the case here, because if he gets going and he gets hot, Bouchard has the offensive ability to really kind of explode here. So yeah, I looked at those power play numbers with Tyson Barrie, and I was a little surprised
that's interesting.
Their power play has been so effective, even when he isn't on it, which I think, like I said, fits like a glove. But I think we need to give more credit to the guys like Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, McDavid, who really run that thing. It seems like the defenseman would do it, but it isn't actually him that's doing it. So let's talk a little bit about the Jesse Pujujarvi trade, or as he pronounced his name when he was meeting with Carolina media today, Jesse Pujujarvi. He was trying to pronounce it for them because they didn't know how to do it. Are you disappointed in the trade? I had written an article kind of suggesting after the Tanner Jeannot deal and the 5 picks and Cal Foot that Tampa gave up to get him, that we were going to be disappointed with the return on Jesse Pujujarvi because he was not going to fetch anything. And he gets, he picks up a prospect, Ken Holland, that isn't going to be playing for the Oilers for a long time, if ever. This was really just a cap dump that he was able to get Carolina to take the entire salary with no retention, which is solid, but there's not much coming back here. So are you disappointed with the trade? Are you disappointed with the return? Or is it kind of just, what, this needed to happen?
The only thing I'm disappointed with was just that the whole thing didn't work out. I think you can't be disappointed with the trade itself. It was time for a change. I think it was time for a change before this season even began. And you kind of always held out a little bit of hope that something would all of a sudden click. But I think it was just clear, more and more clear as time went on, that there was just something needed to happen. And like I said, it's disappointing because Puljujarvi he seems like a really likable guy. I think there's not really any Oilers fans, even kind of the biggest ones, that don't like his on ice play. I don't think you can really find anyone that doesn't like the person. So it's too bad it didn't work out. And honestly, I think as far as spots that he could land for himself, I think Carolina could be a good fit for him. He's obviously got some other Finnish players there, had a great connection with Sebastian Aho years ago at the World Juniors. So I really hope that it works out for him there. But as far as being disappointed by the trade, no, like you said, this was nothing more than a cap dump. And if that prospect does happen to turn into anything, then that's just a bonus.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens with Puljujarvi, because there's going to be a lot of people here who are going to either be like, I told you so, or they're going to be like, man, was I wrong? Because it's really fitting that he goes to Carolina, a team that is known for its underlying analytics and driving the play, but like never scoring, which is exactly what Jesse Pujujarvi is. He's a guy that drives the play. He's got good numbers, but he never scores. And that's more of what Carolina's picking up here. So I really do hope that he is able to find his game there and that it works out. And yeah, maybe the Oilers will be like, oh, that's too bad. But at the same time, you really want the player to do well. And I think that it was time. It was interesting to me that Ken Holland said that he did confirm. He talked to Marcus Lato, his agent, and Puljujarvi about coming back and saying, look, I want to keep you, but not at the rate that we're paying you. We're not going to qualify you. We're interested in signing you for this. And it was Puljujarvi's camp that said, okay, well, we're okay with that number, but we just want to do it somewhere else. And so at that point, it was, okay, well, we got to trade the guy. And we kind of knew that that was probably happening anyway. But you're right. It was time to go. It was time to move on. Now the Oilers have $2 million and change in cap space now with, I think, what's going to be a 21-man roster. Do you think they're done? Is this it? Like, are these, because it seems like maybe they're a little shy at right wing now. What do they need to do here to kind of finish things off? Like, I don't get the sense that Holland's finished here.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. And there's a lot of different things that they could do. Like you said, the right wing without Puljujarvi now could use maybe a boost there. And even just, and I know there's a few defensemen they have like Broberg, Ekholm that can play that offside, but even maybe a defenseman on like a right-hand shot defenseman. So I'm kind of curious if they do just look for depth in that area. There's obviously a few guys kind of on the right wing and right side on the blue line that are still out there and could make sense. And obviously as many as we've heard, I'm sure there's plenty more that we haven't heard that are being thrown out there as well. So I don't think they're done either. I'm just curious to see if they look to upgrade more so up front or still kind of beef up that back end.
Do you think in beefing up the back end that they will do so kind of at the expense of Bouchard? Like, are they confident he can take that role, or do you think they're going to look for somebody who could take the Barrie spot, moving Ekholm over to the left-hand side and having someone come in and quarterback that power play? Or do you think it's a given that Bouchard's going to do it? Like, because there are options out there depending on what teams are willing to. Like, I look at a team like Anaheim with John Klingberg, who we know the Oilers have been interested in. And if you get a double team, a third-party broker on that, his deal comes down to like 1.75, which fits for the Oilers cap right now, right? I'm not saying they're going to do that. I'm just saying that option is out there, right? It could actually happen where the Oilers could give up a second and a fourth or a fifth to get a third team to retain salary on a pending UFA and hold like $1.5 million or $1.75 million and get him in under the cap. Like, and he could run that power play where Barrie was for the rest of the season. Like, there's certainly options. Do you think they do that and try to get somebody in there so that Bouchard doesn't have to step up, or they'll fill underneath Bouchard and let him run that power play?
Yeah, I mean, I can see where that would come from, like why fans may be would think that they would look for an upgrade there, but I think it's more of a guy that's just a defensive defenseman. Nobody's talked about it, so I've ruled it out from happening. But like a Radko Gudas in
I
Florida, like
figured you were
on a
going to
deal
say
like
that name. I've thought
yeah.
about him too. Yeah.
I would love to see Radko Gudas as an Oiler, but he got traded earlier now. But like I think like a Luke Shen type, kind of a guy like that, I think is more what they would be looking for. Like I don't think this player that's coming in now is going to blow you away by any means. I don't think like a guy like Chikrin or someone like that is on the table anymore. Obviously, just making it work money wise would be difficult, but also I just don't see the fit at this point. But I think more of like a defensive defenseman that can slide in on that second, third pairing and just be a steady defensive presence would be, if they are looking to add a blue liner, that's the type I'm expecting.
Yeah, no, that makes more sense. I think these options are not dead. Like I said at the beginning of the show, like I think the Chikrin thing could still happen, but it's a very small percentage because Arizona would have to go, man, we misplayed our hand here. Like we really screwed this up. And now we're going to have to figure out how to retain some salary and dump for what we can dump. And he's still got time left on his contract. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen. What about, I know that you're working, I think you're working, you can correct me if I'm wrong, on an article. We're talking about some of the maybe depth pieces and the smaller names that are out there. Can you give us a hint on anybody that you're talking about? Like, are you looking at forwards exclusively?
Yeah, I think like the main one that came to mind kind of when I was thinking earlier was Nick Bjugstad, just because you'd heard it before, and then I'd seen Darren Dreger. He kind of brought him up again. But another one that I've seen linked again tonight, that not so much a depth forward. He had like 62 points last year, but you've been hearing whispers again about Tyler Bertuzzi. So I'm curious, like that's a fair bit of money. I didn't get time to double check his deal before, but I think he's 4 point something million. So
Yeah,
it'd be a bit of a difficult one to fit in, but obviously if you can, like that would be a huge addition, especially on top of the Ekholm one. Like that's one that I think even if that was the first deal that went down today, it might not have been the number one fit, but I think fans would still be thrilled just the kind of style he plays and what he can provide. So if there's a way they can make that happen, I'm not sure how they do. And I think it depends how Detroit kind of performs tonight. And they might have one other game before the deadline to decide if they do for sure want to sell. But if they do, like that's a guy that would be a huge pickup for them.
Yeah, no, he is exactly the type of person. He hasn't had the greatest season, considering what he is used to scoring and production levels that he puts up. It hasn't really been there for him this year, but that doesn't mean it won't turn around. And that doesn't mean that he's not the kind of power forward that you absolutely would love to have in the playoffs, right? Like he's an Evander Kane light with the same kind of game, right? So exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Josh Anderson kind of space, but a pending UFA. You're right. If Detroit decides to sell, and this is something that they're looking to dump, I don't know what the ask would be, and I don't know if you need a third team to get involved to make it work. And if that's possible, I don't know. But Ken Holland proved today that he's not just sitting idly by, right? We all kind of figured he wasn't going to do anything. It was really starting to sound like this could be a disappointing trade deadline where not much happened. He certainly proved that wrong today. Let's talk a little bit about the game tonight. Toronto Maple Leafs. So Ekholm expects to be in the lineup, and it's going to look, the Oilers have a tough road ahead here. They've got a handful of games against some really offensively potent teams. What happens here with Toronto? Do you think he fits in like a glove and meshes really quickly and things, kick off on the right foot with Ekholm in the lineup? Or do you think it's a little bit of a bumpy start getting him in here?
I mean, I hope so. I think guys like that like he's been such a consistent presence for Nashville for such a long time. But so in that sense, I'm saying I think he could just fit in, but at the same time, he's only ever played in Nashville. So this has obviously got to be a shock to him. Like there was comments he had a month or two ago when there was rumors about him being on the block that he seemed very surprised. Obviously he had just signed that 4-year extension not long ago. He's just in the first year of it. So there could still be some shell shock there of just not really expecting that to happen. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But as far as just the game overall, like you said, it's going to be tough. Toronto's done a fantastic job of kind of improving their roster, as of many teams in the East. But I think if they bring the same effort they did against the Bruins, they can be successful. They played really well in that game. It's just all about kind of what Oilers team shows up, because then we seen what happened against Columbus a few days before that. So it's really kind of still with this team. You just don't seem to know for sure what you're going to get one game to the next. But I think if they play like they did against Boston, they can have success.
Yeah, you're right. Ekholm's the guy that he'll obviously try to figure out what the Oilers system is as quickly as he can and fit himself in there. But his game is his game. He's going to play it and he's going to do what he does. And I don't think that's going to change a ton based on whatever system he's running. He did talk to the media today, and he did say that he was expecting to be traded when they started moving Jeannot and they started moving other people out of Nashville, that he knew it was coming, and he's like super excited about it. So, and they asked him, how long do you think it'll take him to get ready? He's like, maybe a day, maybe less. Like he was very confident that he's going to fit in right away. So that's a really good sign, right? Like he talked about the leadership on the team. So he's clearly already thinking about the fact that he is one in Nashville, and he could probably do that here at Edmonton too. So I think the Oilers are going to get hyped by this. I think they really played up to Boston, and they didn't pull it out. They weren't able to get the win, but they played a really solid game against the best team in the NHL. And I think they're going to do the same. They would have done the same for Toronto anyway, but now with Ekholm in the lineup, I think they really kind of come out and get a good start. What do you think the score is going to be? You think the Oilers are going to be able to win this one?
Yeah, like you said, I think I think they'll be disappointed that they weren't able to get the win against Boston. I think that was obviously that would have been a huge win. I think the Bruins have lost like 9 games all year, something ridiculous. So I think they'll kind of carry the positives they were able to build from that. And like you said, obviously the momentum from this trade. So yeah, I think the Oilers will take it, and I'll give them I'll say a 4-2 win.
I have a feeling it's going to be an offensively heavy game. Like it could be 5-4 by the time it's all over. I think though, losing to Boston, they're probably going to win one, lose one, lose one, win one kind of here. Yeah. So I'm going with Edmonton to win over Toronto here. I do have a feeling it's not like Toronto moved major pieces, like when they're moving Engvall and they're moving Rasmus Sandin and stuff, but they're disrupting their lineup quite a bit over the last couple of weeks here. And it will take a little bit of getting used to figure all of that out and some juggling. So as much as we talk about Ekholm fitting in with Edmonton, there's going to be a lot of that in Toronto too. Like they're going to have to figure out where everybody fits. So I think both teams are even on that respect. So I'm going to give this one to the Oilers. I'll go 5-4. My last question for you before we close things off here, I'm going to get the over under at 2. And that is how many moves Ken Holland makes before Friday. Where are you putting it?
I think 2 on the dot. I'll say over just because I'm hoping that I guess there has been already, but yeah, I'll say over. I want to see a few more things. I think like I said, I would like to see that kind of defenseman on the right side. And then if they're able to pick up a right winger, whether it's kind of probably more of a depth guy, I think just money wise, but yeah, that's what I'll go with the over, I guess.
Yeah. I'm going to say over 2, and I'll say it only simply because I think the pieces that would have to be moved out to bring somebody in. Like I heard Jason Gregor at TSN talking about Nick Jensen today out of Washington. I think that would be a very interesting addition. He's the kind of person that cap wise fits exactly where the Oilers are at, probably would fit in very well with this group, his skill set, things like
a right shot too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Like right. So he solved some of that problem we were talking about. So I could see that, but I think you probably have to move something out to do it, whether it's a Devon Shore or somebody else. Right. So I could see that happening. And I think they probably will try to pick up, right winger if they can do it. So it'll be interesting to see what he can pull off. He's got a little more space now than he did before. And if there are teams, he did say today, though, there were not a lot of teams willing to take anyone back in the trades. So he's going to have to move prospects or something. And that he was able to get Tyson Barrie thrown into that deal when probably a lot of teams weren't interested in doing that is interesting. Well, Colton, thanks. This is fun. I have a feeling that we're probably going to have more to talk about on Tuesday when we record this one next week. Yeah. And there'll be more action. And I'm waiting for the West to explode. It still hasn't done it yet. Like the Oilers made a big move and there's not been a ton of action in the Western Conference, but somebody's got it. There's got to be more than, a couple. Everybody's been doing it in the East, but nobody's been doing anything in the West. So I have a feeling we still have a few days left for the action to kind of pick up here. We'll see what happens. Well, everybody else, thank you for watching. We appreciate you tuning in for this. Don't forget, subscribe and like on YouTube, share it across to any social media channels. Check out the hockeywriters.com for everything else related to the trade deadline, because there's lots of stuff going up there all the time. Thanks again for Colton and myself, Jim Parsons. This is another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. We'll talk to you guys on the next one.